Welcome everyone. Glad to see you on my channel. Today I will tell you about an unusual story, an amazing story about companionship and love. I wish you a pleasant audience.
Kevin didn't think of himself as a bad person. He just didn't want almost 1 million to end up buried in the ground. He just believed that his family's history was coming to an end, and since this was the natural order of things, it was stupid, and generally crazy to miss his chance to finally get what he had been deprived of all the years of his marriage. And it all started about 6 months ago, when Kevin's wife Selena decided to go to the doctor. She just wanted to know why so often severe headaches and dizzy spells, why suddenly cold hands and feet and blood pressure spikes. In general, the symptoms were unpleasant, spoiled everyday life, but did not seem something very terrible. The doctor prescribed a lot of examinations, tests, and then shocked with words that the reasons for all this as if there was no. Selena's body seemed to be completely healthy according to all the data that science could extract from it. However, it soon became clear that science could be wrong. Another doctor to whom she went, not satisfied with the words of the first that she may have just nervous fatigue, was interested in one of the indicators of the blood test, and he ordered new examinations. Then Selena, comforting in advance that there is no need to worry, called for the next test. And soon this young woman knew almost all the clinics in the city where they tried to answer the question of what is happening to her. Meanwhile, her health was deteriorating. In one place, the doctors gathered a whole concilium. And finally, as tactfully as possible, they presented the results. It turned out that Selena's case is unique. This is almost never seen on planet Earth. It turned out that at the age of 29, that is, unusually late, in her body awakened some corrupted gene. Specialists said that this is great news. Rare unfortunates suffering from this genetic disease usually did not reach adulthood, and Selena's doing so well. And so, as a result of all this, she ended up seeing a doctor who seemed willing to help her. Okay, that's enough. The young woman interlocked her fingers so tightly that it hurt. She straightened her back and looked the gray-haired professor, who was telling her about all this, straight in the eyes. "How long do I have left?" 3-4 months, he said. Harry had seen all sorts of things in his life, but this patient had impressed him with no tears, no lamentations about how she didn't understand why she had to do this, just dry, businesslike questions. "There is one drug. The patient receives it in the form of an injection. You see, with your disease, as time goes by, the symptoms get more and more, you feel worse, and then it gets very bad. That's just a simple way of putting it. And this drug, it slows down the process. But it won't save me, right?" Selena grinned. The human body, unfortunately, is not yet fully understood. Harry took off his glasses, took out a handkerchief with initials embroidered by his wife, also a doctor, and began to wipe the glasses with concentration. "You see what the matter it is? Currently, scientists around the world are trying to learn, so to speak, to change the human body at the most basic level, that is, by manipulating the genes. However, often all this exists only at the theoretical level. I'm afraid it will be too long before such methods will be allowed anywhere for the real treatment of severe cases, such as yours. You see, it's still not fully understood. In fact, you can't do experiments on living people, can you? And as for the drug I'm recommending, it will." Kevin didn't think of himself as a bad person. He just didn't want almost 1 million to end up buried in the ground. He just believed that his family's history was coming to an end, and since this was the natural order of things, it was stupid, and generally crazy to miss his chance to finally get what he had been deprived of all the years of his marriage. And it all started about 6 months ago, when Kevin's wife Selena decided to go to the doctor. She just wanted to know why so often severe headaches and dizzy spells, why suddenly cold hands and feet and blood pressure spikes. In general, the symptoms were unpleasant, spoiled everyday life, but did not seem something very terrible. The doctor prescribed a lot of examinations, tests, and then shocked with words that the reasons for all this as if there was no. Selena's body seemed to be completely healthy according to all the data that science could extract from it. However, it soon became clear that science could be wrong. Another doctor to whom she went, not satisfied with the words of the first that she may have just nervous fatigue, was interested in one of the indicators of the blood test, and he ordered new examinations. Then Selena, comforting in advance that there is no need to worry, called for the next test. And soon this young woman knew almost all the clinics in the city where they tried to answer the question of what is happening to her. Meanwhile, her health was deteriorating. In one place, the doctors gathered a whole concilium, and finally, as tactfully as possible, they presented the results. It turned out that Selena's case is unique. This is almost never seen on planet Earth. It turned out that at the age of 29, that is, unusually late, in her body awakened some corrupted gene. Specialists said that this is great news. Rare unfortunates suffering from this genetic disease usually did not reach adulthood, and Selena's doing so well. And so, as a result of all this, she ended up seeing a doctor who seemed willing to help her. Okay, that's enough. The young woman interlocked her fingers so tightly that it hurt. She straightened her back and looked the gray-haired professor, who was telling her about all this, straight in the eyes. "How long do I have left?" 3-4 months, he said. Harry had seen all sorts of things in his life, but this patient had impressed him with no tears, no lamentations about how she didn't understand why she had to do this, just dry, businesslike questions. "There is one drug. The patient receives it in the form of an injection. You see, with your disease, as time goes by, the symptoms get more and more, you feel worse, and then it gets very bad. That's just a simple way of putting it. And this drug, it slows down the process. But it won't save me, right?" Selena grinned. The human body, unfortunately, is not yet fully understood. Harry took off his glasses, took out a handkerchief with initials embroidered by his wife, also a doctor, and began to wipe the glasses with concentration. "You see what the matter is? Currently, scientists around the world are trying to learn, so to speak, to change the human body at the most basic level, that is, by manipulating the genes. However, often all this exists only at the theoretical level. I'm afraid it will be too long before such methods will be allowed anywhere for the real treatment of severe cases, such as yours. You see, it's still not fully understood. In fact, you can't do experiments on living people, can you? And as for the drug I'm recommending, it will at least reduce the symptoms." And at the end of the prescribed period of time, he realized that he could and even should be brutally honest with his patient. It wouldn't be so painful. "Is it very expensive?" the woman asked after a little silence. "About 1,000,000 rubles, Harry replied. "Unfortunately, it's almost impossible to raise money through foundations for such a thing. You know, it's not about a cure. It's only about temporary relief." "Thank you," Selena said, standing up and smiling at the doctor. "Open, clean, bright. Thank you for explaining everything." After the appointment with Professor Harry, Selena had to go home in a cab. She could no longer travel around the city in public transportation, because at any moment she could feel very ill. She could be on the verge of fainting. She might need to go outside. The disease was destroying her vestibular apparatus as well. Selena was silent, looking out the window. Behind the car window there was a small public garden, flooded by the shy spring sun. "Stop here, please," she asked and got out of the car on the curb. She took out her wallet to pay. "I'm not going any further. I mean, I will, but I'd like to walk a bit. The weather's so nice today. I'll call another car later." "Are you sure?" the cab driver asked. He worked as a private driver and was a neighbor of Selena's who lived across the street. Sam gave Selena a minimum fare ride and really sympathized with her. "Yeah, you go. Why would you be idle? I might take a longer walk." "No," Sam shook his head. "I'll wait for you." "What did the doctor say, by the way?" "I'm sorry if this isn't." "I'm glad everyone's worried about me," Selena joked. "It makes me feel important." "Thanks, Sam. The doctor said there's a chance. We just need to organize everything properly now." Selena decided there was no reason to tell the whole truth. At least not right now. It would lead to unnecessary, heavy, soul-crushing conversations. And right now, she wasn't ready for that. "That's right," the man nodded. "Never give up. All right. You take a walk. I'm going to go to the burger place. It's delicious, home-style cooking." He immediately embarrassed himself, realizing that he had said it for nothing. It came out as a tease, because Selena could not eat fatty, flurry body refused to accept heavy food. "Bon appetit." Eat a grand for me too." She waved her hand at him and slowly walked down the alley. At this time of year, lilacs were blooming exuberantly, and it seemed that the bushes were just tossed with white, softly purple, pink sea foam. Selena squinted at the bright, blinding sun. Its rays caressed her face, warmed it, and it seemed that it was just paradise. Such happiness, when you just walk quietly, when you breathe fully and just exist, here and now, in one moment and the next that merge into your life, which it was time to stop fooling yourself, as Selene chided herself, was coming to an end. In the beginning, as soon as the diagnosis was known, she was advised to see a psychologist, and he began to talk about the 5 degrees of acceptance, about how important it is not to reject what happens to you. Selena did not go to him for a second appointment. It just wasn't her specialist. He just said something else nasty to her. Selena walked back through the square, exhausted, as if here, on this small island of nature in the middle of the big city, was the last of her strength, ability to fight for herself and hold on at all costs. When she and Kevin had gotten married 6 years ago, he'd said he wouldn't feel like a man if they lived with her parents. Living with his parents wasn't an option either, but Kevin's cousin, who had a family life that hadn't worked out and had to move into the vacated living space with 3 children from 2 fathers, was waiting for them to move out. For the wedding, they were asked to give envelopes of cash rather than things. From the wedding trip, at the insistence of Kevin and his mom, Selena refused. "You can eat it all. You can skip it all," her mother-in-law said sternly. "You have to think about the future." That's how it turned out that on their honeymoon, Selena had a headache about the mortgage. For her, by the way, they paid it first equally, and then, when the same sister Kevin overdue credit, taken on a very expensive TV, the mortgage was completely on Selena's shoulders. "I can't leave my family in the lurch." Kevin pounded his fist on the table. And then, as if unnoticeably, Selena's paycheck began to leave only a little for herself. And if before she had thought it ridiculous to hear stories about women who worked and asked their husbands for pantyhose, now she was among them. Selena only once tried to talk to Kevin about the fact that it was not fair. After all, he had already paid off the loan for his sister. But Kevin had yelled at her then, saying that he told her it was too early for them to have children until she stopped wasting money and learned to manage it properly. "What are you up to, eh?" he asked threateningly and banged his fist on the table again, which was becoming his habit. "Do you want to sit on my neck on maternity leave? I know people like you. You don't have enough money." He curled his lips contemptuously. "Well, that's just it. You married a simple laborer, not a millionaire." "You're not a laborer," Selene said. For the first time in this quarrel, she allowed herself to speak to her husband in that tone. "My father was a laborer in a factory from the age of 16. And you're a corporate culture manager. What kind of worker?" Then, when her husband had dinner and was watching TV, she came over to make up. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. All people work differently. You work hard, and I really appreciate it." Selena felt guilty, but she also saw her husband's guilt in what had happened. He was talking about the sick again, about the baby. What was all that talk about maternity leave when Kevin had been saying for 3 years that he just wasn't ready to be a father? He said he didn't have the parental instinct yet, and sometimes he joked about how his wife had only breeding on her mind, but he wouldn't raise another man's child if she cheated. Upon returning home from Professor Harry's, Selena didn't hesitate. She called her parents, then her friends, then her colleagues at school. She didn't have to think up a long, ornate speech. What all this? She said everything simply was at the professor. Yes, he says that everything is bad, but everything can become a little better if there is one drug and it costs money. Yes, we need to raise about 1,000,000 rubles and the deadline is burning. She'd also added that if the collected money is not enough in the end, then of course, she will return to everyone how much she took and herself. Well, then it turns out that it was not fate. Her parents didn't live far away and her mom's first impulse was to come. But Selena said she just needed to be alone. She wanted to see them too, to cuddle and, perhaps she could, and should even, cry together. But let it all be tomorrow, but today. Most of all, she just wanted to sleep. Sleep in general lately seemed to her a luxury, a bliss. As long as Selene slept, she felt no pain, no nausea. And falling asleep this time, the young woman smiled at her gloomy thoughts that it seems very soon she would have something similar to such a dream, an infinitely long rest. Exactly 1 month later, the million was collected. Selena was amazed, but acquaintances and friends and very distant acquaintances and friends were carrying the money. People were not scattered with words of encouragement or persuaded to believe in the impossible or asked for any receipts. They just brought whoever and however much they could. His father said that he and his mother had sold his grandmother's set, which was a valuable antique and had fetched almost $120,000. Imagine that, Kevin said. Turns out people have money and are willing to just throw it away. He said this at dinner. That evening, Selena felt very well and even managed to prepare 2 dishes, spicy goulash for her husband and steamed chicken breast with vegetables for herself. She also decorated the table with 2 roses in a vase. That's how much money she had on her card after the other purchases. Yes, this day Selena felt so good that she even went shopping. It wasn't necessary, but it made her literally feel alive, just going about the chores of everyday life that were familiar, ordinary in the past. Throw it away? She asked, confused. How else? Kevin grinned and sent a spoonful of goulash into his mouth. The gravy ran down his chin, but he didn't seem to notice. It's clear it won't save you. It won't, Selena muttered. She set the instruments aside. I don't understand. Kevin, what are you talking about? I told you that. I already heard that. It'll relieve the symptoms. They're just screwing with you. Don't you get it? Selena suddenly felt sick. It's like a hot helmet was dropped on her head. They're cheating you out of money. They have the usual drugs. They have everything. They just give it away out of desperation. Her husband kept muttering. You know, you're right. Selena raised her chin. Desperation, yes. Would you look for anything? Agree to anything if it happened to you? Lucky it didn't happen to me. Her husband nervously pushed the empty plate away from him. Lucky you didn't give birth to children, invalids, or you'd be left with some invalid. What? Selena opened her eyes. My disease is not hereditary. It's a unique. You're the one who's unique. Kevin got up from the table. You're disgusting to look at. If I were you, I'd be in your shoes, and you're running around, jumping around, then you fall down and I follow you around. What am I, your nurse? I should have put you in a hospice earlier. Is that what this is? He pointed his finger at the flowers. You're making funeral arrangements already. Why 2? I didn't have enough money for more, she answered quietly. Kevin, please, I'm sorry if I've offended you. I feel something. I don't feel well. Walk me out, please. I need to lie down. Kevin froze. The air around him seemed electrified and could have been struck with a painful, whipping lightning bolt of his irritation. But he helped his wife into the bedroom. He even threw a blanket over her. I'll soon release you, whispered Celine and ducked her face into the pillow. She didn't want to push pity. It was just the way it came out. Suddenly she ran out of strength, completely, to hold on, to smile, to tell everyone that she would fight and not let some stupid wrong gene ruin her. The woman's shoulders began to shudder. I'm going to go, came Kevin's voice. I have to go to a friend's house. Selena didn't answer anything. It only seemed to her that his voice oozed lies. She only thought her husband was disgusted to be around her. Kevin left the house, walked to the subway, and got off at the end station. He dialed the number he had memorized by heart from the street and didn't risk putting it on his contact list. He was answered by a soft, beautiful female voice. It was this voice in Maria that had attracted him at first. She was a giggly, a little frivolous girl from the accounting department who had been working at the same firm as Kevin for 6 months. Yesterday's graduate of a prestigious university with a luscious figure. He couldn't resist. His wife got sick, and Kevin decided it was too much. He got married with the expectation that he'd have a normal, wholesome, healthy, and ordinary family. No, he understood that people get sick sometimes, but with a cold, you could break something. Then there's hepatitis and all that. And this, an unknown rare disease that was sure to lead his wife to her grave. He wasn't ready for that. At first, Kevin held on a little, was, as they call it, on the same page with his family and friends, who told Selena that the diagnosis could be wrong, that modern medicine was working wonders. But then he ran out of strength. He realized that what was happening next was just a fruitless attempt to fix something. Kevin was tired of living with the fact that his family expected him to take drastic action. What kind of action? He didn't know. It just seemed to him that he should be a kind of super husband who would be with his beloved until the end. And he did not find in himself for this, as he explained to himself, the moral strength. And all this time he had no intimacy with Selena. For about a year now, all the conversations in the family were constantly moving to the topic of treatment options. And the money? It was evaporating at the rate of dry wood in a ravenous fire, and it was all to no avail. Kevin was tired of listening to his wife talk about the things she had not had time to do in her life. Skydiving, tangoing in a scarlet dress, scuba diving, tasting a real ripe mango. He thought it was very silly. What was the point of talking about something that would never happen? He was more concerned about the fact that a year ago Selena took a loan to make a good repair in her parents' apartment, bought them some household appliances. You see, mommy's hands are sick, arthritis, so she needs a dishwasher. The loan was still 2 years away from being paid off, and Kevin feared that the payments would end up on him after his wife died. Payments for strangers. Kevin was very angry, and now he was also pissed off that his wife was going to get $1 million and he was going to go for the only shot he had. What a load of crap. It was like an electric shock when he thought about the fact that this money, it wouldn't save her anyway, but it could help him to arrange his personal happiness, so to speak, and secure Maria's favor. Oh, that Maria. She was nothing like his wife. Selena was beautiful, but too modest. She didn't wear revealing outfits, almost never used makeup. Her hair was in a ponytail or a bundle. She couldn't stand jokes with intimate overtones. She didn't recognize alcohol. In general, she was so all right. Kevin circled around Maria like a bumblebee around a flower, but so far there was nothing more than kisses and permission to feel her appetizing forms. Maria hinted that she was a major league girl, and if Kevin wanted to see what she could do. The last straw was the fact that Maria had signed up for floor dancing, supposedly to maintain her figure, and teasingly said that she already knew how to sit on the twine, and in general her body had become so flexible. After stopping by the nearest store for a bottle of wine and her favorite bitter chocolate, Kevin headed to his almost mistress with a smile on his face. A week later, after a heavy conversation over a family dinner, Selena called Professor Harry and he said that the drug would be available for purchase in the very near future. That was good news. On this day, Selena was feeling quite ill. She seemed to herself like a perforated hourglass, the grits from which were escaping even before their due date. And yet, Selena was still hanging on. She strolled leisurely through the apartment, maybe do some chores. But immediately the woman dismissed the thought. She had had enough of imitating a normal life. She wasn't anymore. What was really worth doing was to finish some things. Selena opened the laptop she'd bought with her bonus money 2 years ago. Her husband grumbled that the equipment was prohibitively expensive, and why would such a simple teacher, who does not even play computer games? But Selena knew why she needed it. The new computer had very good color reproduction, so when she watched documentaries about tropical birds and other beauties, the picture was like real life. Plus, the Matrix was of the latest generation, so the woman's eyes didn't get tired or sore even if she had to spend hours at the laptop. But she didn't open it now to relax or have a tutoring session with a student. Right now, Selena was going to write to an overseas charity and withdraw her application to raise money for treatment. It was practically impossible to raise anything there anyway, and for this precious injection, which promised to prolong and ease her life at least a little, the money had already been brought by family and friends. So, Selena opened a personal account on the foundation's website. It was a foundation set up to help people with a wide variety of illnesses from the mildest to the most severe. Selena had already found the form to request account deletion, but then her attention was caught by the #1 notification of a letter for her. This was another feature of the foundation. All correspondence was conducted only on its resources, no regular email. Selena opened the message and frowned. Her excellent knowledge of English, she was a teacher after all, allowed her to quickly understand the message, but at the same time, nothing was clear. The representative of the foundation said that a partner from a private medical organization was willing to help Selena. However, it was not about providing the medicine or raising funds for it. The message said that they were willing to treat her, that a private clinic in India, funded by a private benefactor, might be willing to do it. The letter said that the treatment would be absolutely free for Selena. She would only have to fly in and the tickets would be paid for, and then she would just have to trust. It was all so confusing. Delirious, Selena closed the lid of her laptop and rubbed her face with the palms of her hands, her cheeks burning. Why did it feel so disturbing when she read this? In general, what was this even about? She didn't need this anyway. Stop believing in miracles that don't exist. Professor Harry said there was no cure for her illness. There are developments somewhere, but they are not even approved by the government of the United States and European countries. That is, in fact, as if illegal. Guarantees and even hopes are nil. Being a lab rat? No way. It's better to get something that can really help. Selena looked at the laptop as if it might bite. Okay, that's enough. She would definitely delete her profile from this site. Close the account altogether. She'll have some tea and a little nap first. She's getting a headache again. When Selena woke up, it was 10 o'clock in the evening. Her mouth was dry, her heart was pounding as if she had run a 100-meter race with a 100-pound weight. But at least she didn't have a headache. Selena grinned bitterly. She wished they had invented a device so that people could choose what they wanted, for example, to have an earache instead of a tooth or toes instead of a headache. There were some sounds coming from the kitchen, and when Celine peeked in there was Sam. She rounded her eyes. "What are you doing in your house?" The neighbor smiled. He looked pretty funny in his apron and kittens, but the frying pan, where some vegetables were stewing in a flavorful sauce, suited him just fine. Selena realized she was hungry. "I was in my house, and then I heard some commotion on the landing. I looked out, and there was yours, Kevin, he's got a duffel bag in his hand. He looked at me and said, 'I'm going on a business trip.' I said, 'What business trip?' 'Your wife's sick.' 'I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.' And he said I had to, 'I'm leaving.' And step into the elevator. Honestly, he told me that if I was so worried about you, I should come to you." Sam looked at him warily. "I'm sorry for barging in and running the place, but Kevin just said he was tired of babysitting." "That's what I'm used to hearing," Selena replied. She watched the man at the stove with a smile, leaning her shoulder against the jamb. "It's just that the neighbors haven't cooked for me before in my life." "I haven't cooked for the neighbors before either," he answered her with a smile. "But I thought it might be hard for you. You haven't gotten your medicine yet, so I thought I'd cook. I wanted to wake you up first." And then there, he nodded at the refrigerator. "I thought I'd see what I had. I remember you said that you could stew vegetables, so I cooked them. I boiled some buckwheat pasta. There's only a pinch of salt in the vegetables, but it's good, and some spicy herbs." "Thank you." Selena went to the china cabinet. "All right, I'll go." Sam was suddenly embarrassed as he took off his apron. "Okay, but you can stay. I'll have the vegetables. And you," Selena pointed to the refrigerator, "take what you like. There's cheese and sausage and some nice lecho and boiled potatoes." "And Sam stammered as if he was making a very important decision. Should he go to the moon or stay on Earth? "Well, if only for the company. Thank you. I love lecho. My mom used to make it, so you'll definitely like it." Selena put the plates for two on the table and put the cutlery down. They ate in silence for a while. Don't worry," Sam said carefully. "He'll be back. It's probably something important at work." "I don't care." Selena dismissed it. "In fact, it's even better. Tomorrow I'll go to the bank to drop off the money and Harry will give me the details to pay for the medicine." "That's great." Sam's happy. "Everything will be fine. Believe me, it can't be otherwise." After dinner, Sam claimed the right to do the dishes and then left. Selena went to bed with mixed feelings. Her husband had left, as if he had run away, and her neighbor had shown such care. Why are people so different? And tomorrow, she knew, everything would change. Selena drifted off to sleep with the fantasy that maybe the medicine the professor had named would make her feel truly healthy. Well, at least for a little while. One last time. In the morning, Selena woke up unexpectedly early to find the sun was just rising above the horizon, casting a rose-golden light on the houses and yard. Selena glanced at her watch. The bank she needed was already open. which meant she could make the most of every minute of the day. Humming a tune from her favorite vaudeville show, Selena ran her hands into the bowels of the closet. There, behind the warm plates, was the tea box she put all the money in. There it was. Selena took the box to the table where her purse was already open. Thinking on the way that it was so light. Light, the woman froze. Took a deep breath and opened the box. Empty. Not a single penny. She brought it closer to her eyes, and there, in her husband's handwriting, was a single word, "I'm sorry." Selena found it hard to breathe, and slowly, feeling like she was in slow motion, she settled to the floor. "I'm sorry." Kevin took the whole million, every penny of it. He stole it? Tears came to her eyes like a fog screen. Selena didn't cry. They just streamed from her eyes as if someone had turned the faucet on full blast. She lost track of time. She just sat on the floor, and her fingers frantically crumpled, rubbing the box that still held the aroma of a mixture of black tea and Tega herbs. She realized that this was the end. Professor Harry had told the patient how things would be if she didn't get the medicine. First, she would have difficulty walking. Her limbs would lose their normal sensitivity. Then her internal organs would start to fail. Like a terrible lottery, maybe it would be the liver first, maybe the pancreas. The headaches would worsen to the point where prescription painkillers would be useless. Sure, maybe the body would respond to something, but it was unlikely. And then, Selena wrapped her arms around her shoulders and howled softly. She suddenly realized more clearly than ever the inevitability of a terrible, agonizing end. She also didn't understand. Why was Kevin doing this to her? Was she such a bad wife that she didn't deserve a little kindness from her husband? Because she already does. She's going to leave him alone soon. She'll be gone. The guiding thread by which Selena was able to snap out of her hysterical stupor was the shrill ringing of the phone. Selena didn't see the point in answering it, especially since it was probably mommy calling, or daddy, or the doctor. What would she tell them all? What? But she reached into her purse, pulled it down, dropped it in her lap, and pulled out her smartphone. The phone number was unfamiliar. "Yes," sobbed Selena into the receiver. The voice on the other side clearly belonged to a foreigner. Selena didn't understand at first. What did he want? But then, like a lightning bolt, she got a call from the foundation, the same one from which she was going to delete her application yesterday. Sniffing her nose, Selena asked questions, and the man answered her, and gradually it became clear what he wanted: the representative of the very medical organization that did not want to clearly identify itself hurried with the answer. Does Selena want to get treatment? They promise they will help. Only her consent is needed. To come. Where to? Calcutta. But they told her a lot of things again. They promised they'd help her. And all she has to do is consent to treatment on their terms. She has to consent to any interventions. It's safe. They'll take care of her. Selena could hardly think. She only realized that she had no money for the only drug that could help her now. And she also realized that she was promised to be saved. "I agree," Selena almost shouted into the phone. "I do. Yes, I want to. What do I have to do?" Sam moved into the house exactly the next day after the young couple Selena and Kevin moved in. Only he didn't buy the apartment with a mortgage like they did, but with cash, with the money he had left over from his divorce from his wife. Divorce with her went through the life of 40-year-old man. Typhoon first suddenly revealed the truth that the 6-year-old Barry is not his son. And then the former love of his life said that blood descent, say, nothing means that the father is the one who brought up, and so on. And therefore, as she said, Sam is obliged to take care of his son, and that's it. Sam strongly disagreed with this opinion. He decided that he would cut all ties with the traitor and filed for paternity. There was a court, many gossip among the relatives. In one he won, but the housing had to sell only so managed to normally divide the jointly acquired property. But the fact that moved from a 3-room in a modest studio, Sam was not saddened. He was now free. He could, as they call it, start his life from scratch, and he did. And he did. In the far drawer of the dresser went to dust a diploma of higher education engineer. Sam decided that he needed a whole new sphere of activity and decided to become an ordinary cab driver. Thankfully, there was a car bought before the wedding. The man took good care of the car, did not skimp on good repairs, so that in fact, it was not inferior to very fresh car analogs. And since a good half of the family and even his own parents sided with his unfaithful wife, Sam had to make another difficult decision to reduce communication with them to the very minimum, and when trying to start educational conversations in general, began to play silence for a couple of weeks. And in time, it was as if his family realized that he was a grown man and it was too late to change him. And that's how Sam lived. He went out for shifts when he needed to earn money, and the rest of the time, he just lay on the couch with a game console in his hands or read Scandinavian detectives. He didn't need heartwarming romances with other women. It seemed to him in general that in life no longer need anything, that as lives, so well and be kind, leave everyone pleased with their moralizing. And then she came into Sam's life, Selena. Actually, he was just a polite neighbor for the first few years. He said, "Hello, how are you? Good evening," and other such neighborly, formally polite, but essentially meaningless phrases. But whether it was reading detectives that developed his natural powers of observation, or whether it was just too obvious, but over time Sam began to guess that his neighbor's marriage was far from perfect. He picked up on the sarcastic, mocking phrases Kevin threw at his wife. Occasionally, Sam would cross paths with the couple in the yard or entryway. Scraps of phrases formed an understanding that Kevin scolded his wife for liking to eat fresh fruit year-round, for always talking about her work as a teacher, sharing her worries about her little students. One day, Sam went out on the balcony just to look at the wispy autumn fog creeping over the city, and on the neighboring balcony stood Selena and cried, roared at the top of her voice. She must have forgotten, silly girl, that neighbors happened to be out on the balcony. Then she spotted him, threw, "Excuse me," and ran back to her apartment, and he just stood there. One did not need to be a psychic or a close friend of this family to realize who caused the tears of this young woman with such a charming smile, which, alas, was so rarely seen on her beautiful face. That Selena was ill, Sam had learned by accident. He was just coming home one day when she started to slump to the ground in front of him. He picked her up practically in his arms and sat her on a bench. He wanted to call an ambulance, but she said it wouldn't help and told him everything. It felt like some kind of powerful energy was radiating, that Selena really needed to talk about everything. Then Sam offered to drive her wherever she needed to go for examinations and treatment. He said that it would be nice for him to help her, and it would be convenient for her, because it was better to drive with a person who was well aware of the passenger's condition, who could stop when necessary at the curb to let her get some air, who would not be frightened if she started to faint, but would carefully, following her instructions, bring her to her senses. He was afraid that Selena would not agree or decide to ask her husband's permission. Who knows to what extent this Kevin tyrannizes his wife to control her. But Selena said yes, and from then on, Sam became her personal driver. Sam woke up that morning and immediately remembered the good times he'd had at Selena's house yesterday. Isn't that the fantasy of an infatuated man? Husband on a business trip, and you go to his wife's house and cook dinner, for example, because she's sick. Sam chuckled at his thoughts. Then he looked at the clock. He jumped up, tangled in the blanket, and almost collapsed. 11 in the morning. Selena had said she had to go to the bank today and then to the professor's office. He could send the requisites for the medicine, but he also wanted to consult on how the process of fighting for the patient's life would look like. Having quickly cleaned himself up, dressed, and skipped breakfast with only a mug of coffee with milk and a cracker, Sam left the apartment. A couple steps to the side and he was there. He pressed the bell button. Selena didn't answer. He was about to dial her number, but the door finally opened. "Hi," she said. "I'm not going anywhere," she added thoughtfully. She was clutching a few hangers of sweaters in one hand, a travel bag in the other. "Thanks for helping," she muttered absent-mindedly and tried to close the door. Sam didn't want to be an intrusive neighbor with the makings of a maniacal stalker, but then he just put his foot in the door and it wouldn't close. "Celine, what's wrong?" he asked worriedly. It was immediately obvious something was wrong. The woman in front of him was disheveled, teary-eyed, and also, what did the travel bag have to do with it? Actually, they were literally going to the bank and the clinic. Selena looked at him absent-mindedly. Then she smiled, so strange and a little crazy. I'm leaving. Where to? Sam asked, still being on the landing all but the bottom of the leg. She was in the neighbor's apartment. Selena blanched. A storm of feelings flashed across her face, like she regretted what she had said, like she wanted to say something else, like she wanted to keep crying and laughing at the same time. Come in. She opened the door, stepped aside. Sam entered. She closed the door and walked into the hall. It was impolite and violated all personal boundaries, but he looked curiously into the bedroom, where the contents of what must have been the entire closet were lying on the bed. On the coffee table were piles of papers. Sam picked up one paper. It was something medical. He hastily put the strangers back. What's going on? Is this about Kevin? No, she shook her head. But yes. Selena took a deep breath, splayed her hands. He took all the money. What? What are you talking about? Sam asked, but he already knew the answer, of course. It was probably about the money set aside for that very medicine. Sam, by the way, had also brought money for it from himself. He just couldn't stay away. Selena's husband, by the way, didn't know about it, or he probably would have forbidden to approach her at all. But Sam would still approach her, because he just couldn't do it any other way. He couldn't stay out of this woman's life in misery. And it wasn't about love, that romantic nonsense where you feel the need to possess someone so much that you can't stand the sight of them. No, Sam was driven by something else entirely. He just felt a deep affection for Selena, and he felt it was so personal, so intimate, he wasn't gonna tell anyone, especially not to Celine. Finally, from Selena's rambling story, Sam understood what had happened. It wasn't easy to understand and realize, however. It had come as a real shock to him to hear Selena admit that the cure Professor Harry had promised wasn't really salvation, that it was, in fact, only postponing the inevitable. But he wasn't angry at Selena for not telling the whole truth. Sam himself had suspected all along that Selena's illness was probably possible, incurable. Now he'd just gotten confirmation for his worst assumptions. And before Sam could digest the information he'd received, Selena told him about the strange message on the Foundation's website and the phone call. Wait, he caught hold of her hand. A young woman was just passing by, carrying another item to her bag. You are offered to go to an unknown place, and you agree to entrust your life to strangers. I am offered to fly to Calcutta, a city in India. It's quite a modern metropolis, Selena explained, and they are not strangers at all. I checked the information. It's a private clinic. They are funded by a British medical research center, and it's not just a clinic. It's a whole complex. They have their own laboratories and everything they need. They also have private sponsors. That's the kind of person who is willing to help me. This philanthropist must have looked through the questionnaires, and he was interested in my case. So I'm lucky. You said I'd trust you with my life. What life, Sam? What life? Selena raised her voice and tried to pull away, but the man didn't move, just grabbed her other shoulder and pulled her closer to him. I'm dying, Sam. I got maybe a couple months left. I don't have any other way out. I don't know how they're going to treat me, but I don't care. You know what I mean? This is at least a chance, at least some hope. She finished barely audibly, and her head bowed, her hair draped over her face. All right, he said, letting her go. Good. If that's what it takes, fine. Maybe they'll help, but I'll be with you. Selena raised her head and they met gazes. Her eyes flashed with the almost frantic hope of a desperate man driven to a dead end. His eyes shone with steely determination. But, no buts, I've made up my mind, Sam said. You won't be alone out there. I'll look after you. We'll figure it out on the spot. Selena was in a new shock because she didn't expect this from her neighbor at all. It's true, I'm not very good with foreigners. Sam scratched the back of his head. I have a passport, that's right. Last year I thought to fly to Turkey on a hot ticket to have a good time. But then my car broke down. I had an accident and flushed everything down there. But I have a passport, and that's the main thing. Will you need a visa there? No, answered Selena. That's good, by the way. I'd already got the money for the tickets. We leave in the morning. Great, Sam said. His tone was cheerful, but the man felt strange. like he'd gotten on a roller coaster, already buckled up. Let's go. And there's no coming back. From there, the conversation turned to practical matters. Sam wanted to find out as much information as possible, and Selena shared everything she knew and assumed. She said she had already searched the internet. She had found the clinic's page, and it didn't seem to be a particularly well-known organization in India itself. But the point was that it seemed to have been specializing in the treatment of complex, rare diseases for years. Selena had also managed to find an article by an Italian journalist who wrote that diseases were being treated, but it was really all on an experimental level, and no one could guarantee the patients of the clinic that they would not experience any dangerous side effects or consequences that the doctors themselves might not even be aware of. And no one could promise doomed people that they, having chosen these dubious methods of treatment, would survive at all. The same journalist said that this is, in fact, the last hope, and that there are no real confirmed cases of recovery. Practically none. Sounds like the beginning of a cheap thriller with a bad ending for the heroes. I'm sorry, Sam said honestly. I know, Selena nodded. They sat in the kitchen. She slid into a chair with her legs tucked under her and sipped her condensed milk tea leisurely. Sam opted for a strong black coffee. His life had just been turned upside down, and he was doing it all voluntarily. If he had been in the habit of stronger drinks, he would have had some. But all he had left was coffee. You see, Selena explained thoughtfully, when I just started to look for how to treat the world's diseases complex, just when I found out that I was sick, I began to be interested in everything. In general, I learned that in many countries laws prohibit doctors, treat experimentally, and in India, she waved her hand. Very flexible laws, and unfortunately, corruption is rampant in some places. So, there's plenty of room for scientists, but there's something else. It's bad. The thing is that some drug corporations are experimenting there, and the locals agree. They're willing to be test subjects to make some money, to feed their families. It's awful, Sam shrugged. Isn't it dangerous for you to go there? I thought about that. Only, Celine grinned unfunnily. What kind of mouse test subject am I, huh? I'm sick to my stomach. The only thing you can do with me is treat me. Anyway, I guess I just don't have any other choice. Okay, Sam winked at her. I'll keep an eye on you. I'll get a tan. I haven't been on vacation in a while. Oh, Selena's eyes widened. The money for the tickets. You have to spend your own money. No, that won't do. It's okay, Sam said. I got a stash. But would this clinic mind if I came with you? I haven't asked them yet. I'll call them right now. Right now. The woman reached for the phone. Stop. Her friend stopped her. Don't. Think about it. If it's clean, what normal clinic would object to a patient having a chaperone? None, right? It's a normal practice. Sounds logical, Celine agreed. That's what I mean. Okay, just one more thing. He scratched the back of his head again. What a fool I am. I have a friend in India. What do you mean? Selena didn't understand. The usual. He studied to be a programmer, so he says that he can work from any point of selenium. However, lately this point was in his parents' apartment. But then he saved up some money and was going to Thailand. Then he spent a month in Vietnam. Yes, he said he was going to India. He wants to surf there. But the sea is far from the city. Where are we going? Yeah, Selena thought about it for a minute. A lot. Well, that's okay. I don't think we might need his help. And what good is a programmer, right? He's not a hacker to hack into your clinic server and find out what kind of water they're really stirring up. Sam muttered under his breath, typing a message on his phone. But still, when you have at least one acquaintance in a foreign country, it's easier, isn't it? Well, I guess so, the woman said. She had another headache. Very badly. Only now, when Sam was around, when he, in fact, a complete stranger, was suddenly willing to do so much for her, Selena suddenly realized that this pain, which she had always rushed to take a pill for before, she could tolerate now. She sipped some more tea. Is it really possible for a dark streak to turn into a bright one? Kevin stretched lazily as he felt good. The sun was blazing. Another cocktail sent a wave of lightness into his head, and a young, shapely mistress was splashing in the waves ahead. Yes, Maria turned out to be very grateful. They grabbed the last places in the travel agency and went on the hottest ticket to the tropics, on an island near Africa. whereas the manager assured the travel agency usually could afford a vacation only millionaires. This trip for two people took a good part of the taken sum. Kevin's passionate friend spent a lot more in the local store. It turned out that she needed new dresses, swimsuit, handbags. Kevin felt like a king. Pamper yourself, my beauty, and do not deny yourself anything. According to his calculations, the remaining money should have been enough to go to restaurants, buy some little things, and then Kevin tried not to think about coming back. Because even though he had the courage to take the money, he realized that he would be questioned for it. His wife, her parents, acquaintances. Kevin cursed at himself mentally. He could have turned things around, left the door to the apartment open, and the lie that thieves had gotten into the house in the first place. And he could say that he was only on a business trip. However, all this was still somewhere far ahead of him. But here and now, Kevin stretched again. His mistress would soon splash in the water, and it would be time for them both to move into the refreshing coolness of the room. The girl is so good in her bathing suit. The men are drooling all over her, but she's even better without it. Kevin was pulled out of his pleasant thoughts by the trill of the phone. He took it, as he always carried it with him, according to his old habit, developed on business trips. The phone was ringing, and it was annoying. Kevin picked it up and frowned. It was his mother-in-law calling. Of course, she was the last thing he needed was a tantrum. He firmly rejected the call. The phone beeped, announcing a new messenger message. Kevin decided to delete it and leave it alone. But to delete it, he had to open it first. And then his eyes caught on a line. His brain, not quite intoxicated yet, read it. Kevin's eyes widened. What the hell was that? You killed her. How on earth could you? Sam took her to India. Kevin blinked and reread the message over and over again. What the hell? Yes, he had taken the money that wouldn't have saved her anyway. But what was the mother-in-law trying to say? Did something happen to her right away? What about the doctor's words that there's time? And what does that have to do with their neighbor cab driver? How did he pick her up? And what does that have to do with India? If Selena's dead, Kevin broke out in a cold sweat at the thought. If she's dead, no, that can't be true. What does this have to do with Sam, neighbor? What's this about India? He jabbed his fingers into the phone, dialing his mother-in-law's number. No answer, but why? Kevin gave his father-in-law the same result. He felt sick and all the alcohol was gone. Oh, the water is so nice. The sun was blocked by the shadow of the lover's figure and she stood next to him, rubbing her wet hair vigorously with a towel. Do you want a massage? With this on screen, she wiggled her hips spectacularly. Kevin? The girl's voice changed as she noticed something was wrong with her man. Hi, I'll go to the room, you go ahead. He answered and wandered away without turning around, holding the phone to his ear. Kevin, what's wrong? A young beauty called out to him. Then, not getting an answer, she just shrugged. Something curious caught her eye. Kevin had left his wallet on the chaise lounge. She smiled and tied her pareo around her hips. She could find something to do. She could go to a jewelry shop and a cafe for exotic desserts. You have to pamper yourself if you have to put up with this at night. Kevin tried to call his wife's parents the rest of the day and all evening to no avail. Then he dialed his parents, but they answered that no, his wife had not contacted them and neither had her relatives. Not wanting to be embarrassed by such a crazy hint about his wife's connection with the neighboring cab driver, Kevin did not tell his parents anything. He didn't realize who to turn to with this at all. He just felt kind of sick and uneasy. He felt so bad that he had rejected the caress of his young, grateful, tropical vacationing girlfriend that night. And then, in the middle of the night, he began to throw things into his bag. I'm going home. What? Sleepily asked Maria, looking out from under the blanket, in which she, offended by the ignoring of her sponsor, wrapped herself like a cocoon. Are you crazy? We still have 4 more days to go. I can't. It's an emergency. I've got a wife. Kevin stopped himself just in time. Couldn't you have thought of her before? The girl snorted derisively. What about me? Are you leaving me? What about? Do you need more money? Kevin said angrily. He reached into this second wallet, not the one he had taken to the beach. In this second wallet, he kept his main supply of money. He counted out enough for a return ticket. He wanted to throw the rest at his mistress. But he changed his mind and threw her only a few bills. It would be too fat, and he wouldn't get anything else from her, for that matter. "Here's for you," explained the rain of money waking up on the girl. "It should be enough for the rest of the trip. We've already bought the tickets there. You'll come back alone. Explain to me what's going on." Flashed with rage beauty. "I don't want to get involved with people like you again." Hysterical grandfather. "Come on, it's over between us." Kevin didn't say anything and pulled up his pants. He put on his shirt, jacket, shoes, forgetting his socks, and left the room. He had to go home now. There was something wrong there, and for some reason he had the feeling that it could ruin his life. "I'm a horrible person." Selena exhaled, unbuckling her seatbelt as the plane took off safely. "Nonsense," Sam, who was sitting next to her, told her. "What else could you tell your parents? That you decided to give yourself into the hands of mysterious scientists who were illegally experimenting. Sounds like the plot of a cheap thriller in which none of the characters is in danger of surviving," the young woman said thoughtfully. "Would you like a drink?" A smiling stewardess appeared next to their seats. "Do you have tomato juice?" Sam asked. He hated fruit juices, only vegetable juices. "Yes, there's also celery juice. Just tomato." "Selena, do you want anything?" "No thanks," she shook her head. She was beginning to feel like her appetite was gone altogether and she wouldn't eat a bite or drink a sip until she got home. Healthy. Only, how real was that even? It was as if Selena could still feel the gentle, loving embrace of her mother and father on her shoulders, feel the touch of her father's lips on her forehead, how they had said goodbye to her. They believed the lies with which she had wrapped the truth. She had said, as it were, that the money for the medicine Professor Harry had told them to use was no longer there. Her husband had taken it. With icy calm, Celine also added that he probably took it for his mistress. Just what else would he have taken it for? She knew for a fact that Kevin wasn't a gambler, that he didn't like any kind of loans at all. He wasn't trying to start any business. Logically, there is another woman. Selena also made sure to convey to her parents the idea that she didn't care about her husband's betrayal. There are, more important things to do right now, like saving her own life. She said that one international medical center unexpectedly responded to her questionnaire and that they would try to cure her with the latest technology. It was true. And the fact that it all looked like a dangerous venture. Selena knew for sure that if her parents knew the truth, if her friends knew the truth, they wouldn't let her go. Well, how could they not? She, as an adult and capable person, could have flown, but she just couldn't leave her loved ones in such a state. Her relatives, of course, were astonished at her haste, but Selena explained that it was just treatment was terribly expensive and there were few places, so she had to take them while she had them. And they were also amazed that her neighbor was keeping her company, but she said that he was her friend. Yes, she wants him to accompany her, period. Selena's cousin Sam wanted to go too. He was a student. He said it was okay if he skipped a little bit of the session, but she told him no. She said he shouldn't go. It's better to let him study. "Selena, we're here." Sam touched her shoulder. "Already?" She woke up. "You're pale. You should have eaten." He shook his head. "Okay, now we're on the ground. The chairs are so narrow, I can barely straighten my back. Maybe I should be treated here too. What are they worth, sciatica, if they can handle you?" He tried to cheer her up with a joke, and she smiled back out of politeness. They flew light with just a couple of bags of carry-on luggage, so they were in the main hall of the airport quickly. "So what's next?" Sam looked around. "Oh, is that us?" He pointed to where a European-looking girl, dressed in a strict black suit and white shirt, stood. She was holding a sign with Selena's last name and initials written in transliteration. It looked like Selena took a deep breath. 1, 1, 2, 3. Here it comes. Selena had asked herself that question several times throughout the flight, but had never been able to figure out what exactly she was expecting. Her imagination, probably because her consciousness was overworked by the recent events, drew all sorts of pictures more suitable for Hollywood movies. For example, that on arrival she would be stuffed into a car, separated from Sam, and no one would ever find her again. Or that they would be taken to an underground secret scientific base. However, the reality was quite different. The girl, who introduced herself as Megan, calmly accepted the news that Selena had not flown alone and only said that if they had been warned about the presence of a companion, they would have paid for his tickets too. She'd also clarified who Sam was, her husband, relative, or something else. Selena replied, embarrassed, that he was just a friend. Megan wasn't confused by that. She asked for Sam's passport for a moment, just to take a picture and forward it to the clinic to be processed as a chaperone. The clinic was in the suburbs and was, as Selena realized at first glance, a huge compound surrounded by a high fence, with armed guards at the entrance. The clinic looked like a mansion, surrounded by a well-tended garden. Megan said that there was a tennis court, a swimming pool, a movie theater, a cafe. There was no charge for anything, in the sense that everything is free for Selena. But that's because she was lucky to get into the clinic under a special program, all thanks to one benefactor, and so treatment costs hundreds of thousands of dollars or even millions. Except that Megan never once mentioned the name of this generous person during the whole conversation. "Free cheese," Sam said meaningfully to Selena as she translated what Megan had said to him. "We're not allowed to go outside the clinic," Selena added, ignoring her companion's suspicion. "The epidemiological situation is unfavorable in the city, so, according to the terms of the contract, we'll be here for a couple of months. And all this on a tourist visa, issued in 5 minutes at the border. Legally, I can't say," Sam sighed. Megan said that they would reorganize everything through their own channels somehow. If they were to do it for the treatment visa, it would take too long, and we don't have time. Selena, like all people, was not happy with the hospital environment, so she was pleasantly surprised that instead of a ward, she was going to live in a spacious apartment divided into 3 small rooms. As she looked around, she was surprised to realize that there was not only a marble bathroom with fresh flowers, but also a small kitchen. Megan explained that it was all for the convenience of the patients, for some people were used to home cooking and strictly defined meals. Sam was placed in a nearby apartment, which was more modest, but also very comfortable. On the first day, Selena was demanded, yes, it was so delicately demanded, to sign the necessary papers. Moreover, they were made in 3 languages: Hindi, English, and some copies were in Russian, so that she could easily understand the content of the papers. Selena said that she needed some time, and she was given it, and the next morning she signed everything. "Aren't you in a hurry?" Sam asked. They sat in a small cafe and ate. That morning, Selena had already met several specialists, doctors who would be treating her. They were all Europeans and some Americans. Their leader, as Sam, who was still very suspicious, called him, introduced himself as Alexander. "Maybe we should have consulted a lawyer," Sam asked. "Where can I get one here?" "You can consult remotely," Sam grumbled. Despite the fact that everything seemed fine, he had a strange and disturbing feeling that there was something wrong with this place. "I looked at it in English fluently and in detail in Russian. It's fine," I signed there, sighing. Selena sipped her milkshake from the tube. "That I agree to the experimental treatment, which is developed by such and such a doctor, using such and such technologies. Alexander told me a little about what they would do." "And what did you get out of it?" "Not much," she smiled sadly. "But what am I risking, Sam? They don't charge me a dime. It's all free." "Thank you. There are still good people out there. There's this sponsor who's helping the clinic. By the way, where are the other patients?" Sam suddenly asked a question. Selena had thought about that too, but then she dismissed the question. And now they had to go back, because since yesterday they had seen only doctors and also service staff, such as waiters, gardeners, but they hadn't met a single person who looked like a patient. That same day, Selena asked Megan about it. She replied that the clinic had a very narrow profile of specialization, and it just so happened that so far she, Selena, was the only patient here. Then, after some thought, Megan added that it was normal practice for such a serious place to have all the luminaries of science focused on one patient. He gets maximum attention. This answer seemed logical to the young woman, and Sam seemed to agree. Toward evening, Selena called her parents to say that she had gotten there, that everything was fine. "No, don't tell me anything about Kevin, please." She cut her off rather abruptly when she realized that her mother was trying to turn the conversation to her husband, her ex, by the way. Selena was determined to get a divorce as soon as she got back. If she came back, of course. And then the examinations began, some tests, and finally the treatment process itself. Selena realized that all this was a natural and necessary part of her life now. But she tried to think about anything but her illness outside of the very manipulations that the doctors were doing to her in the rooms that looked like a set for a Hollywood science fiction movie. Selena couldn't imagine now. How would she be here without Sam? She and he used to walk in the garden, watch movies. And then, about a month after arriving at the clinic, Selena suddenly got worse. She just fainted in the garden, and falling into Sam's arms, Selena thought that it even looks like a scene from a love novel because it's so romantic to lose your senses near the rose bushes. She came to her senses in the ward, or rather in her room in bed. She was surrounded by doctors. Celine was told that it was a natural process. It was just that her body had begun to undergo some serious changes and the planned treatment, so to speak, had entered its active phase. She was also told that the next week would be crucial and that she would have to be extra careful and generally follow bed rest. Selena, encouraged by the fact that she might soon be completely healthy, agreed to everything. "Would you like anything else?" The maid turned to Selena. She was a very young girl, and it was clear from her appearance that she was a local Indian. She had just placed a bouquet of hyacinth flowers on the bedside table. "Thank you, no," smiled the woman. "Have you worked here recently?" "Yes. My uncle helped me get a job," she said brightly. "It's a very nice place. I get paid a lot more than the hotel I worked at before. Now I can pay my younger brother's school fees." "That's good," Selena agreed. "But I don't have any siblings, and I've always wanted to." They exchanged a few more words, and then Vimala, the girl's name was, remarked in passing that she had come here by pure chance, because her uncle had known a man for many years. Vimala's uncle had a serious business supplying medical equipment from the UK to local clinics. He happened to know a British gentleman, John Davies, who had been the main sponsor of the clinic for 2 years now. The uncle had put in a good word for his niece with Mr. Davies, and thanks to that she was working here. Selena was a little tired from the long conversation, and even though the doctors assured her that everything was going great, she often, very often felt unwell. She wanted to tell Vimala politely that she would like to take a nap, but then the girl noticed her patient's drowsiness and wished her the best rest and left. By evening, Selena had more energy and went to the cafe. She was accompanied by Sam. They ate fish baked in leaves and chose saffron curry to accompany it. "Remember when I wondered who the mysterious patron of the arts was whose name was being withheld?" she said suddenly, and shared what she had learned with her friend. "Probably the man is just a rich guy who is scary and doesn't want everyone to know that he does charity work." Sam shrugged his shoulders. "Maybe he's just modest." "Yeah," Selena nodded. "I'm lucky there's one person in the world who cares about a rare disease like mine." In the evening, Sam sat in his room and mindlessly watched all kinds of entertaining videos on the internet. He had been thinking a lot about Selena lately and how he felt about her. He realized that she had already become a special person in his life. But what to do with that next? He didn't want to upset the delicate balance of friendship that had developed between them. Then Sam remembered the conversation at dinner and just for fun, typed the name of this man who had sponsored Selena's treatment into a search engine, started the online translator and plunged into reading. And after a while of reading, Sam frowned. "What's wrong?" Selena asked when she and Sam met for breakfast. "Nothing." Sam was lazily stirring the salad leaves in his plate. "What did the doctor say?" "They say I'll be healthy soon." Selena sighed. "They sometimes show me some graphs, explain everything, but it's so unclear. They say that now I'm in the final stage, and now, in order to consolidate the effect, it will be necessary to introduce one drug. It'll consolidate all the treatment that's been done so far." "I see," Sam nodded. "Selena, can I ask you a question?" "Yes, of course." "What is your blood type?" "Fourth." "Why do you ask?" So, can we talk somewhere else?" "Let's take a walk." Sam looked around nervously, suspiciously. Selena shrugged and got up and followed him. "It's really good to walk a little bit. I found out who the sponsor of the clinic is. I looked it up on the internet." "So?" Sam started telling Selena everything he learned. He told her that John Davis was known as a big businessman and multimillionaire a few years ago. But then he was forced to hand over all his business to his son, who took over the board of shareholders. The reason for this decision was that John became seriously ill. The advanced age of Mr. Davis was already over 70, of course, complicated the treatment. John was not stingy to pay any money to be saved. He agreed to experimental, complex treatment. And it seemed that the disease had receded. But then it came back again. The latest news could be gleaned from the yellow press, which theoretically, of course, could say anything. But they wrote that the last hope of John Davis' transplantation of some organs and tissues. There was even a scandal connected with it. It was written that he, through his money and connections, tried to move himself to the top of the waiting list, and then John disappeared from the radar of the press. And now it turns out he's sponsoring this clinic, Sam said. It's all terrible, Selena sighed. But I don't understand what this has to do with me. What are you talking about? I mean, it's only natural for him to help someone, since he knows how hard it is to be sick. It's just a kind act. You know, this John has the same blood type as you, Sam said quietly. Did you know that very few donors are suitable for such people? They only need people who are also type 4. And besides, they also wrote that this John is a supporter of the theory that it is necessary to select a donor not only by blood type, but also by some genetic compatibility. These are some very recent and not yet proven scientific theories. I don't, Selena stopped abruptly. What are you trying to say? Think. Sam stopped too, walked around to stand in front of her, and was now looking Selena straight in the eye. Suddenly, you get a letter from this medical center. They're suddenly willing to take on treating you for free. What does that have to do with it, and what do you? Celine tried to object, because she didn't like where Sam was going with this, but he kept talking. You come in on a tourist visa. You don't even leave the clinic. There aren't any patients here anymore, just staff. Selena, I don't mean to sound crazy, but you'll be completely healthy. Selena, putting his hands on her shoulders, Sam squeezed her shoulders and lowered his voice even more. Don't you think that they want to fix you for a reason? Maybe that's why they want to cure you, so that you'll be suitable material to cure another person. I'm sorry to be so blunt, so frank, but I really think that maybe that's what's going on here. Sam, you're saying scary things. That sounded really crazy. Selena couldn't make sense of it all, and yes, she could see a certain logic in Sam's words. We're in India, Selena. You said yourself that here, sometimes bad things happen. A quiet sob escaped the young woman's lips. She suddenly remembered that she had given all her documents to Megan, who had taken them for some paperwork, and then told her that they were kept here in the office, that she could take them back at any time, of course. Selena just wanted to slap herself for being so careless. How could she have been so stupid? Was it thanks to that maid's accidental slip of the tongue that she and Sam had learned the nightmarish truth about this place? Was she really here for a reason, and really here to? Because she'd been chosen by an elderly rich man as the perfect donor. Of course, he could probably get someone else with his kind of money, but what if the information about her blood type and her genes got from the foundation into third hands and this man, that is, the people who work for him, decided that she was the perfect object, the right material? Look, I don't think it's that big a deal, Selena said, more to comfort herself than Sam. I mean, it's all very serious. They can't know that I'll agree to it. Suppose they could offer me money, lots of money, but I could always refuse. What does he want? She asked, and her heart skipped a beat. I think he's got kidney trouble. Well, it's not the heart, Selena grinned. Theoretically, the donor doesn't have to die for this. Selena, Sam just hissed at her. What the hell are you talking about? I was just suddenly thinking about the fact that if it's as bad as you say, then what if they don't need my consent? I won't let anything bad happen to you, Sam said firmly and put his arms around her, pulling her against him. That night, Selena, though she felt very tired, couldn't sleep. She just couldn't stop thinking about the subject of her conversation with Sam. On the one hand, she realized that her assumptions were this was completely absurd. Was it even possible in the modern world? But she knew that sometimes terrible and bad things happened in the world. And who knows? Is she here thanks to the goodwill, a gesture of mercy of a millionaire who himself, in fact, is terminally ill, or she is chosen to become a victim, which will serve to save him? And what to do if the worst assumptions are true? Run? Go to the local police? But first I have to get my papers back, and besides, what if she's wrong? Then she'll refuse the final treatment. And then, as the doctor said, that young, blonde doctor, his name was Alexander. He was the head of the team of scientists here. He said that the final and most important stage of the treatment is ahead. No, we have to stay here and try to figure it out. The dream finally began to pull Selena into its embrace, and before falling into it finally, she thought of something else. Maybe, if she was given the choice to become a donor, because it was not fatal and receive treatment or refuse treatment, she would choose the former, because that way she would be able to survive. Selena shivered under the warm blanket. What a terrible choice. But if it came down to blackmail, she would have said yes. The next morning, Selena awoke unusually early. Usually at this time, she was still dozing. The young woman opened her eyes and almost shrieked because the ward, that is her room, was unusually crowded. Megan was here, very pale. In her hand she was clutching a folder with some documents. Here was Dr. Alexander in a crumpled robe, and by his face, it seemed that he had not slept all night. Here was his assistant, and there were some strangers, and judging by the clothes, strict business suits, that did not belong to the staff of the clinic. One brunette man with piercing gray eyes attracted special attention among them. He stood closest to Selena's bed and looked at her so intently. The young woman shuddered at the thought that this strange group must have been here for at least a few minutes, and that he had just stared at her asleep. "Sorry, we didn't mean to scare you," Megan turned to Selena, "but Harry Davis wants to talk to you." "Davis?" Selena sat up abruptly on the bed and immediately felt dizzy. "Are you related to John Davies?" "Do you speak English well?" the young man asked. "I was told you were Russian." "Yes, I am his son. I speak English well," Selena said. "I am a teacher. I teach this language at school. We can communicate without an interpreter." Events. Whatever's going on here has obviously taken some kind of serious turn. "Can someone explain to me what's going on?" Selena asked anxiously, looking around at the crowd. "We need to talk about your treatment," Harry began cautiously. "If you're feeling well now, of course." "In her condition, she can't be under much stress," Alexander said, giving Harry a frown. "Oh, is that so? I don't think your opinion at all. After what you've done here, it doesn't matter anymore," growled Harry at him. "What's going on?" repeated Selene confusedly. "All I ask is that you react calmly to everything," Alexander said grimly. "If you need to be sedated, just say it." Without listening to him, Selene turned to Harry, and he spoke. He began by saying that his father had unfortunately passed away. It had happened just this night. Harry explained that he had been here in India, in Calcutta, dealing with not exactly business matters, but more specifically, he had been dealing with his father's affairs. "I'm sorry for your loss," Selena said. At that moment, she wasn't even thinking about what would happen to her treatment after the benefactor died. She just felt sorry for the man who couldn't cope with the disease. "My father was stationed here," Harry repeated, "in this clinic, but in a separate building, and but he planned to meet you. It was supposed to happen just the other day. He wanted to tell you about why you were here in the first place." Selene looked at him confused. "There are eyes and ears everywhere," Harry said, and sent an unkind look to Alexander. "The thing is, it's come to my attention that my father... Anyway, what you were talking about with your friend Sam, you were right. My father wanted you to be his donor." "What?" Selena jerked on the bed, but the movement must have been too abrupt, and it gave her a severe headache and made her dizzy, and the woman leaned back on the pillows with a quiet groan. "Please don't worry. You're in absolutely no danger. But you've turned out to be amazingly perceptive." Harry continued his story. It turns out that John Davies had decided he had to find a donor at any cost. But in the past, he had already suffered a failed transplant and now feared that another failure would be fatal. That's why he decided to search for a suitable donor, not only by the standard parameters, but also using the latest methods, not yet even fully recognized by official science, with which it was possible to match a person by genetic compatibility. Naturally, the search for candidates because of this was still reduced, and to such a probability, at which the chances of finding a donor literally tended to zero. Using his connections, Mr. Davis searched for people all over the world, and such a person was found. The thing was that Selena had applied to the very same foundation registered on an island in the Caribbean. Harry said that initially his father wanted, of course, to find a less healthy person, but then something incredible happened. It was all about the fact that John and Selena had essentially the same disease. It was just that the elderly millionaire had it in a less aggressive form, which allowed him to keep himself alive all these years. The people John hired were looking for likely donor candidates in every database they could access. And then one day they got people's data from the very foundation Selena had applied to. And that's when Harry jabbed a finger in Alexander's direction, decided it was a brilliant plan. You see, treatment for a disease like this, it's very hard on the body. It stresses all of its systems. My father, with his age, it was especially difficult for him. And then this madman, Harry sighed, decided that if he could genetically edit your body, that is, your body, Celine, your internal organs and blood, they would be essentially invulnerable to disease. And then they would be fully usable to use them to save my father. Celine froze. She looked around the crowd with wide open eyes. You wanted to take me apart. Are you crazy? Alexander couldn't help himself. Who do you think we are? We only wanted to make you a lucrative offer. Mr. Davis was ready to reward you generously if you agreed to it. You could become a millionaire, and you could easily live without a few things. And of course, Harry added, you wouldn't have warned her that her health was very fragile, that such an intervention in a couple of years would have made her an invalid, right? And what was the plan if she had refused? The man's tone dropped. What would you have been willing to do then? This conversation is over, Alexander shouted. What right do you have to dispose of this place? Let me think, grinned Harry. If only because I'm my father's sole heir, and accordingly, his obligation to fund your research has passed to me. By the way, I don't think it's worth continuing. I'm afraid you've committed, shall we say, a lot of offenses in recent years. The local authorities will probably be very interested in talking to you, won't they, Alexander? Excellent. The blonde grinned, and it looked like he was more than confident. You think it's that easy? Well, try it. My scientific research was needed not only by your father, but also by someone else. Don't think that you are the most influential person on the planet. Please, Celine said quietly. Please, go away, everyone. I don't feel well. I need to be alone. With those words, she fell into unconsciousness. And when she came to, it was Harry again. He was looking at her intently. There was another man next to her, in a doctor's suit, but at least it wasn't Alexander or any of his assistants Celine had known before. But the main thing was that Sam was beside her now. He was holding her hand. Hi, he said and smiled. What's wrong? He asked excitedly, noticing the bruise on his cheekbone. I didn't immediately realize what was being explained to me. I thought he was one of the bad guys too. That's what happened with one of his guards, Sam replied, glancing at Harry with a frown. Actually, I'm not so sure about that even now. What did he say? The millionaire here turned to Selena for translation. He thinks you're the villain type too. It was hardly an appropriate situation, but Celine found it funny for some reason. You're right to suspect me, Harry nodded. My father. I didn't think he'd go this far. I found out too late. We didn't even have time to talk about everything. But I guess I can only make up for a little of what he did. Your treatment isn't over yet, is it, Selena? I think there's one more drug left, she said. What are you talking to him about? Sam asked excitedly. Selena answered him. Is this another treatment? No, I'm not. Sam. Selena squeezed his hand gently. It's okay now. I'm not going to get hurt by anyone else. I have to finish my treatment. Only, she looked at Harry. Is it possible for me to get the treatment, but without Alexander and the others? I'll be honest. I don't want anything done to me by people who see me as just a means to cure their rich client. It's possible, Harry said. Alexander left the clinic. I've notified the local authorities, but we have a little time before this place will close. You'll have time to finish your treatment, and then you'll need follow-up care. You'll have to stay in India for a few weeks. I'll get you transferred to another really safe hospital where they'll just monitor your condition. And then you will be able to go home. Thank you, Salim replied and smiled genuinely. Harry kept his promise, and soon Selena received her last dose of the experimental drug, and then she was transported to another clinic. Sam, wherever possible, never took a step away from her. Selena called her family to tell them that she was almost completely well, and she was very grateful that her parents remembered her request and didn't say anything about Kevin. And then, a few weeks later, it was announced that Selena could come home. But after the doctor gave the good news, the head doctor at the clinic where Selena was being seen was an Indian woman named Lakshmi. You should know something. Mr. Harry Davis gave me all the details of your treatment, and I can now understand why this happened. The doctor lowered her eyes. That's right, sighed the head of the clinic. The disease no longer threatens you, but the experimental treatment you underwent, it made you infertile. You won't be able to have children. I'm so sorry for you. Selena froze. She forgot how to breathe. Just a few minutes ago, she felt like the happiest person in the world because she was healthy. But now, she realized with terrifying, merciless clarity that she would never be a mother. For some reason, she didn't want to ask questions. Somehow she knew it was true. Thank you for telling it like it is, she nodded. So now I can go home. Rain drizzled on the day of departure, and the gray, puffy clouds promised that India would soon be hit with the full force of tropical showers. Selena sat in the lounge next to Sam. He was holding her hand, as he was accustomed to doing. Let's get married, he said suddenly. Selena turned and their eyes met. It was so unexpected. She had only thought of him as a friend and had never imagined that he— Are you serious? She asked. That's not how you propose, is it? Sam grinned. I know I should have waited until you were divorced and made it nice and romantic, but it's just the way it is. I just can't keep quiet about the fact that I love you anymore. Sam, I can answer that I agree. But there's something, Selena sighed. After the treatment here, apparently Alexander broke something in my body. I won't be able to have children. It seemed to her that something faded in Sam's eyes at that moment. Selena couldn't know that when he thought about her, he dreamed about how big and friendly their family would be. She could just see the change in his gaze. Sam was silent for a few moments. He realized that so much depended on his answer now. So much. Selena's future life and his own. So he answered, I still want to marry you. But I'd already realized that. He interrupted her. Not because he didn't want to hear it, but because he didn't want her to say anything she might regret. I'll tell you the truth, I dreamed of having children. I told you how it turned out in my last marriage, but I just love you. I think I'll be able to revisit my dream. Also, you have a lot of relatives, right? Probably some of them have kids or will soon. I think I can settle for just being someone's, well, probably like an uncle. A relative who gives toys and takes them to the zoo. What do you think? Do you think you and I could play that role? Yes, Selena answered and touched her eyes with her fingers, wiping away the tears. It would. I love you too, Sam. I just realized it now. I love you and I want for us to always be together, no matter what happens. We will, he nodded, and then kissed her gently for the first time.